Good day, everyone. This is your teacher, Miss Mars. And on today's video, I am going to continue my discussion on Unit 2. And if you could recall, the Unit 2 is all about materials evaluation. I already discussed with you Lesson 1, which is all about the definition and principles of materials evaluation. Unit 2 is only composed of 2 lessons. So that's why on today's video lecture, I am going to continue my discussion on Unit 2 and we will talk about Lesson 2, which is all about the types of materials. So I know you all are very much eager to learn now Lesson 2. So without further ado, let's begin. So allow me this time to share my screen to everybody. So here is now our PowerPoint presentation. Again, class, lesson 2 is all about the types of material evaluation. So we have here our lesson 2 introduction. So this lesson delivers you to detailed discussion on the different types of materials evaluation. So there are different types of materials evaluation because no single evaluation is alike. And we will also be providing you examples so that you will be given a comprehensible input along the course of this discussion. Comprehensible input, it's something that would allow you to understand fully what is being discussed. So let's try to take a look at our DLO, or the desired learning outcomes. After completing this lesson, you are expected to, number 1, be able to identify the types of materials evaluation. And at the same time, you will be able to differentiate class the different types of materials evaluation. So I know you are all very excited. So what are now the learning contents in this video lecture? So there are types of materials evaluation. But before we proceed to the various types, let us try to take a look at first this one. Evaluations class are not the same because they basically differ in purpose, in the personnel, the formality, and the timing. So purpose, why are we evaluating? What is the purpose? Why are we evaluating? You should know your purpose. Let's say, for example, why are you evaluating your smartphone? Because you have plans to know if there is a need for you to buy a new one, or to, just keep using it for the time being, right? So that is your purpose, to come up with a decision if you buy something new or you would still use it for the meantime. Same with the materials evaluation. Why do we evaluate a material? Do we evaluate it because we want to know if the material is effective for this group of learners? Or do we want to evaluate it if the material is in demand in the market and it's being used by teachers in different regions of the Philippines? So we have different purpose. And also the personnel, for example, who demand the evaluation. Who is asking you for the evaluation? Is it the publisher of that book? Is it your academics head, right? Or are you just wanting to evaluate for your own knowledge, that you want to know how this material that you are using is best serving you, or what's its performance, or let's say, is it still useful? And then formality, okay, because it's just being required by, by the department, okay, and you have to definitely conduct that because you have to report something about that. And timing, like, what is when do you evaluate a certain material? Do you evaluate it during the time when it is being used by the users, or before the material is utilized? So there is a specific timing class. Because let's try to have an analogy. I am using a smartphone, so I'll be using smartphone all throughout. So let's say smartphone, diba? You just go to the mall, and then you were having in mind that you may also want to take a look at some new phones. So before you buy it, you check it first, right? You try to, explore, and that is pre, okay, before really the implementation, because implementation class in that context, it could mean before you use it. Okay, so pre first, pre-evaluation. Okay, so that is a timing that, oh, I have to evaluate, because from your pre-evaluation, you would know if it's really the best material suitable for you. Okay, because you have to explore it first. And then when you are evaluating it during the entire course, now that you are using it, then that becomes during, right? And then it's also different if you are using it. I know you're evaluating it maybe after a year, and then you have used it already for several years, and the post now, so that's already different. So I am just giving you a little bit of explanation. We could talk more about this one under this topic, of course, types of materials evaluation, but I'm just telling you that there is timing. Why do we evaluate? And in real life, we do that, especially if we purchase something that is not really that cheap. For example, smartphone, your laptop, your appliances, gadgets, whatsoever. We have to be honest. And I know you're also doing this. Before you purchase something, you really look at reviews, diba? You go to Google, you go to YouTube, and then you look for reviews and you look for its specification. That is already you evaluating that particular gadget. So anyway, that's why there is no such term as evaluation is the same, because we evaluate for varied reasons. Next, in order to conduct an effective evaluation, we have to apply the principles of evaluation, which we learned in the previous video. And then we have to apply it to the contextual circumstances in order to determine the most reliable and effective procedure. So contextual circumstances, meaning how is it being used in that specific area, in that particular circumstance, in that culture somehow, because a certain material may have different effect to various group of people or to a specific place or area. So in order for us to come up with an effective evaluation, we should always go back to our principles, the principles of evaluation. Those are our basis class. Why we would say this and that, this and that. That's why we have to go back to the principles of evaluation. And Tomlinson gave us principles. Richards also gave us principles. So more or less, they just have the same gist, okay, or yeah, gist. They have this similar gist, maybe presented differently in words, but if you're going to analyze, very similar. They present very similar principles. So let's proceed to the first type, which is pre-use evaluation. Okay, I said before, diba? Pre-use, so before you use it. Same with when you go to the mall or to a gadget store, and then you're trying to explore a new phone that you are eyeing to buy. Before you buy it, you still have this what we call the pre-use evaluation. Same with any materials. Let's say you go to the bookstore, national bookstore. Before we buy a certain book, we still scan, right? We scan, oh, what are the things in the table of contents. I do that oftentimes, and I also look at, oh, who is the author of this book, right? And then I also, oh, this book is too complicated, too many details, it's very thick. So I consider that, because knowing that if I buy a book, I have to make sure that it really is um, very practical, and at the same time it should be realized, I mean the contents, since we have very limited time, diba? So things like that, there are things that we have to consider, and that is pre-use evaluation. You go to the bookstore, you haven't used yet the material, but you are already evaluating. So it involves making predictions about the potential value of materials for their user. So let's say you are the one who is producing the materials. So before the people who are using it, there would still be pre-use evaluation. No? You predict what could be the potential value of the materials for the users. So you're trying to predict. Everything is prediction because nobody has bought it yet. So this is in the context of the one who is making, diba? Because you predict what is the potential value. Is it? Do you think it's good for the users? Okay, and then can be context free because we also know that nothing is. You cannot get that data from a certain place which used that material. That's why it's context free. So similar with a review of materials for a journal. It can also be context influenced, as in a review of draft materials for a publisher with target users in mind. And it could also be context dependent, diba? Context dependent, as when a teacher selects a course book for use with her particular class. So context dependent siya sa context dependent in the side of the user, of the potential user. For example, the teacher. The teacher is the one who's gonna buy it. So when you being a teacher, you have to think of your class, by your students. My students are blah blah blah, so I believe I need this course book. Okay, so it could be context dependent in the side of the teachers who would buy the course book, because the teacher would consider the class in particular. And you know your class, you know the place, you know the behavior of the students. And then often it is impressionistic and consists of a teacher flicking through a book to gain a quick impression of its potential value. Exactly. This is what I told you, class. You go to the bookstore, you scan it, you look at the table of contents, and then after you check the table of contents, you maybe look at the author, and then you scan, just a very quick tour of the entire book, and that's it. You may decide if you buy it or not. So this is impressionistic. And then we have here frameworks for generating evaluation criteria. Makundan and Ahor in 2010 proposed that a framework for generating flexible criteria would be more useful than detailed and inflexible checklists. So they really propose, class, that we have to create, when we evaluate, it is preferable to have a flexible criteria. And McGrath in 2002 suggests a procedure involving materials analysis followed by first glance evaluation. Okay, user feedback and evaluation using context specific checklists. So context specific, it definitely considers, no, you consider when you create this checklist, you consider the context, the users, the place where it is being used, the circumstance. And then Rayazi in 2003 suggests surveying the teaching learning situation to conduct a neutral analysis and carry out a belief-driven evaluation. In order for us to conduct a neutral analysis and carry out a belief-driven evaluation, that is why, according to Riazi in 2003, we better have the survey, for the teaching learning situation. So, which is also true, no? If there is a survey of the teaching and the learning situation, then more or less the analysis would be neutral because it's being based on facts, the result of that survey. And then Rob D in 2003 suggests a dynamic model of evaluation in which the categories of psychological validity, pedagogical validity, and process and content validity interacts. This is such a very huge suggestion of Rob D, but it's also true, no? When you create a certain criteria to evaluate the materials, we have to take a look at this psychological validity, because sometimes psychological validity would be like, oh, I like this author. You would be biased, diba? Because you idolize the author, sometimes we don't really consider the content anymore. Pedagogical validity, is it valid in terms of pedagogy? Because remember, what we are evaluating is a material that we use in teaching. And process and the content validity. Okay, so according to Rob D, these things should be considered. There should be interaction of these things, of these types of validity. And then let's try to take a look at Then out from there, we have to create a model of evaluation. So I am not going, class, to really dig deeper on the criteria, no, because this is a very much higher level na topic, because of course we're not gonna be making. I am just telling you nga this is how we are going to evaluate, and when we evaluate we have to set a criteria, and these are the things that they suggest. We can just make, class, a criteria that is simple. No, this is a bit not really complex. This is a bit complex. And Mokondan in 2006 describes the use of a composite, okay, describes the use of a composite framework combining na a checklist, and then you also take a look at into reflective journals, and probably computer software that you can just use, and then bravo, you can already evaluate the ELT textbooks. And this is happening in Malaysia. So you can be dependent with a software. So you can be dependent on a software, and at the same time you can create checklists and then take a look at into reflective journals, okay, because probably, class, especially on the world wide web, there are already a lot of existing evaluations somehow on specific materials. Now, one thing that we could consider as an evaluation is when people give their reviews, no? We can base our evaluation based on the review of the people who already used it or who already bought it. And then McDonough et al. In 2013 focused on developing criteria evaluating the suitability of materials in relation to these things. So usability, okay, is it very practical? Magamit ba siya? Generalizability, adaptability, and flexibility. So is it for the for a large group of people? And then, is it easily adaptable? Okay, di ba maglisod ang taga-bukid mo gamit ani nga material? Is it easily adaptable, and is it flexible? Okay, so these are the things that according to McDonough, we have to create material under these variables. No? When do we say it is being usable? So maghimo na din kag checklist. Okay, usable siya if blah blah blah. And then how about the generalizability? When do we say that it has this characteristic? So we create checklist. Adaptability, when do we say it is adaptable? When do we say a certain material is flexible? So this is the suggestion of McDonough. So they have different things in mind, but at the same time, I'm pretty sure their suggestions are very much aligned to the principles given by Tomlinson, and there are still other authors. We also have Richards. So Tomlinson and Masuhara, 2004 in page 7, actually they proposed the following criteria for us to come up or to make or create an evaluating criteria. So number 1, is each question an evaluation question? Okay, we have to know, is it an evaluation question? Because you thought it's an evaluation question, but later on you knew, it's analysis question. Number 2, does each question only ask one question? Okay, is each question answerable? Is each question free of dogma? Dogma, class, means something or a question already hold an established opinion. So when you ask it, there is already very clear already that your opinion is embedded in the question. So you have to ask that. Is each question reliable in the sense that other evaluators would interpret it in the same way? So that is also a challenge, no? But we have to answer these because according to Tomlinson and Masuhara, for them, these are the following questions that we have to answer in order for us to create an evaluating criteria. Now, that is all about the pre-use evaluation. No? So pre-use meaning before we use it. Now let's see, class, the second type of evaluation, the whilst use evaluation. So it involves measuring the value of materials while using them or while observing them being used. So it can be more objective and reliable than pre-used evaluation, as it makes use already of the material class, and there is already the measurement very very clear rather than a prediction, because no longer a prediction. You can already rely on the data, diba? Because it's already used by by people. So same with a cell phone. When before you buy it, that's pre-evaluation. But okay, by the time you are using it, and then you are going to create a review on that, that after a week of using, you are still using it, no? So there is already very good reference because you already experienced it. And limited to measuring what is observable. Are the instructions clear to the learners and cannot claim to measure what is happening in the learner's brain? So this one here, limited to measuring what is observable. So here, the whilst use evaluation, the limit of its measurement obviously is only into um, the what we can observe based on how the learners are using the material. So are the instructions in your material clear? So you can already get a data of that question. And you cannot claim to measure what is happening in the learner's brains. Okay. Only if it's post. You can already measure that. But if it's during or whilst used evaluation, you observe first. Okay. For example, you use this material, the exam ka, you use this examination material, or you use this particular drill for your learners, and then you realize that when you use that material for your drill, students have a lot of questions. So that means it is not clear. So you have to modify that you observe. Okay. But here you don't measure yet. Is it, effective in terms of this group of learners basing on their performance? No, not yet. That would be in the post-use evaluation. So it can only measure short-term memory by observing learner performance on exercises and cannot also measure class durable and effective learning because of the delayed effect of instruction. Remember, we can only measure the short term here because if you would like to measure the long term, probably it would take months or a year somehow before you would say, oh, it really retained in the brain of your learner. Very useful but dangerous too. Remember, teachers and observers can be misled by whether the activities seem to work or not. Okay, so this is the whilst use evaluation. But nevertheless, class, we really do these different types of evaluation somehow without us really conscious nga, ay, nag-whilst use evaluation. I am already doing this type of evaluation. Okay. And in your case also, since you are still students, probably you're not yet so exposed with these evaluating materials. But in our case as teachers, we definitely have that unconsciously. For example, class, I am giving you something. We have a drill, we have some follow-up activity, and then I realize you get low score, or let's say you have a lot of questions, you don't really kind of enjoy and all that, then I would evaluate based on my observation. Next class I am not going to use this. I'm going to create a new one or maybe revise this, and the next time I'll have the other class. I'm not gonna use the same thing that I used to you as long as it's parallel, diba? Because it's not effective. I could see that probably there is something wrong with the instruction somehow and other things. Okay, so what does it measure? It measure, class, the whilst use evaluation, clarity of instructions is number one. Diba? Number two, clarity of layout. Okay, the layout of your materials, comprehensibility of text really easy to understand, credibility of the task. Okay, achievability of the task, can it be achieved? Achievement of performance objectives, potential for localization, and practicality of the materials. Because let's say you are using a certain material, but it's, you know, too far to the learner's context, so they cannot relate. So next time you would say, I am going to make it more localized. And practicality of the materials, maybe you are using a certain material, only you has the access, so make sure students also can use that, if especially if you ask them to answer something. Okay, so practicality, it can be measured. Maybe you would say, okay, class, I have here blah blah blah, but then later on students would say, oh mom, I don't have that and all that. Okay, so you have to, we can measure that. This material, is it practical? Is there practicality of the materials? Is it being used really, or maybe only a portion and then the rest are really not useful anymore, or at all, not useful at all? And teachability of the materials. Is it easy to teach or is it difficult? Let's say, for example, our main reference in this class, it's really a little bit of very deep, not really deep, but not really very, very deep class, but it's a little bit complex that you really have to read it not only once before you would understand and relate it to some examples, because it's just that it's too full of text. And since our topic is all about materials and all that, they really explain a lot of things in the book, so you really have to read it. And there are times that we need to reread it for us to grasp what they really wanted to emphasize. And the material should be flexible. Okay, how about the appeal? You would know it by the time the students use the materials. Is there an appeal of the material? So same with when you meet somebody, if that person has an appeal, you will be attracted, right? Same with the material. If the material you are using or being asked of your teacher that you can use that, if there is an appeal to the material, then you would be attracted and you will be motivated to use or interested to use the material, because maybe it comes like you relate with it. That's why there is appeal. And maybe the reason of its appeal, there is an appeal of the material, is it's of your context, okay, and it's of your level as well. And motivating power of the materials, impact of the materials, and effectiveness of the materials to facilitate the short-term learning. There are some things here mentioned that really are interrelated with one another, diba? Like appeal of the materials. When it's appealing, of course, it would give motivation also to the learner to learn and use it. Okay, because let us be honest, class, if you really find the material very, very difficult, you wouldn't appreciate it. You don't dare even reading it somehow, diba? And then, for example, here, oral participation in an activity can be measured by recording the incidents and duration of each student's oral contribution. Okay, example, you are a teacher, you're having oral participation. So how can you measure that? Record the incidents. Tanaw ni mo. Okay, record it. Duration of each student's oral contribution. How many minutes? Potential for localization can be estimated by noting the times teacher or student refers to the location of the learning. Okay, while using the materials, and even motivation can also be estimated by noting such features as student eye focus, proximity to the materials, and time on task, and facial animation. So these things, so you better record. Okay, if you record, you could be able to extract these data that you are looking, diba? This is how the students react. These are their movements when we are doing the activity, the oral participation. Um, you could say that they have eye focus when they answer, and at the same time, you could also attest that they have proximity, they have facial animation, and the facial thing, and then they also have mentioned a lot of local. Okay, localization can be estimated by noting the times the teacher or a student refers to the location of learning. So this is a very good example for this. Okay. Next class is the last post-use evaluation. So this is the most valuable, but at the same time, least administered. Why? Because pag tapos na, it's already done. Okay. Let's not talk about the past, something like that. Ba? So it's already done, but it's really the most valuable, supposedly. Diba? We evaluate the materials after it is being used. So somehow you need to conduct a survey. Okay, when after the students are using it, you would pass them a module evaluation form. And that is what we are doing, class, when we were still having the modular approach, before we go with the full blast online delivery of instruction, right? If you could recall, there was this semester, the very first semester after the lockdown, we started. That was September, and then most of you were asked to choose. You are modular, under modular, or internet something. But a lot of you also use modular, diba? Because maybe there is still this fear about connectivity and all that. But now I believe you also appreciate more the the internet thing or the Google Classroom. So in the module that we created, there was this module evaluation. And that module evaluation is an example of post-use evaluation. So it can measure the short-term effect as regards motivation, the impact, the achievability, instant learning, etc. And it can measure the long-term effect as regards durable learning and application. Okay, so post-use evaluation, it's important. And what important questions it answers? What do the learners know which they did not know before starting to use the materials? Okay, you should answer that. What do the learners know which they did not know before starting to use the materials? Second, what do the learners still not know despite using the materials? And what can the learners do which they could not do before starting to use the materials? Next, what can the learners still not do despite using the materials? Once pa may di nila mabuhat plus bisan imo nang gipagamit ang materials. To what extent have the materials prepared the learners for their examinations? If you can ask all these questions and the students can give their answers, then definitely that would be your basis for the material modification. So modify na nimo, di ba? What can the learners still not do but despite using the materials? What can the learners still not know despite using the materials? So they would answer that. And from there, you'd say, okay, I really have to add this. Maybe a portion of the topic is very discussed in a very surface level that they really did not grasp the deeper thought or concept about it. To what extent have the materials prepared the learners for their post-course use of the target language? What effect have the materials had on the confidence of the learners? Does the material contribute to their confidence? Example, that is a material for pronouncing a certain word, and after they use it, di man gihapon ka pronounce. Does it give confidence to the learners? No. So it should be what are the effects? So if positive ang result, of course you will be satisfied class that it really gave a good effect. If positive, you would really be satisfied class that it really gave good effect. And what effect have the materials had on the motivation of the learners? To what extent have the materials helped the learners to become independent learners? And then, did the teachers find the materials easy to use? Okay, that is another thing. If the material is too difficult to use, students will never be interested of using the material. So as much as possible, it should be student friendly, especially if it's a module. Okay lang pag-reference. If it's a reference, well, it would be very heavy on discussion and all that. But if it is a module, then if it's a module, it's not really that heavy. I mean, it should just be really friendly to the learners going to use it. And then did the materials help the teachers to cover the syllabus? Okay. Or maybe the materials only class cover a portion of the syllabus and does not cover everything. Did the administrators find the materials helpful to standardize the teaching in their institution? Okay, these are the questions that you can possibly answer if you conduct this so-called post-use evaluation. In conclusion, the post-use evaluation can measure the actual outcomes of the use of the materials and would provide you data on which reliable decisions about the use, adaptation, or replacement of the materials can be made. Okay, so because of post-use evaluation, you can come up with these decisions. Adaptation, should you replace? Okay, should you modify those things? So ways of measuring the post-use effects of materials include test of what has been taught by the materials, test of what the students can do. We can have examinations, di ba? Mag-exam ta, makahibaw ta, if effective ba, or the materials were able to teach the learners. Is it a lot, or only very little. Examinations, interviews through questionnaires, perhaps criterion reference evaluations by the user. Could also be you require the learners to submit post-course diaries, okay, or post-course shadowing of the learners, post-course reports on the learners by employers, subject tutors, and etc. So it could be employers, okay, or subject tutors. So you would ask the learner to submit reports, mga post-course, for example, diary. So like journal ba? Okay, of today, blah, blah, blah. So if you would gather that, then from there you could be able to come up with a decision based on their answers. In conclusion, class, materials evaluation is obviously time-consuming and difficult undertaking. It takes time, and approaching it in the principled, systematic, and rigorous way suggested above cannot only help to make and record vital discovery. So it is really recommended for us to evaluate, because as teachers, we have to be very resilient, no? Because everything changes, our learners, the curriculum and all that, we cannot use the same material when you taught 10 years ago. You cannot use the same materials of to the students you are teaching now. 10 years ago, that was long time, and they have different um, curriculum might be different during the time. So there should always be constant modification. That's why evaluation is very important. So the materials being evaluated can help the evaluators to learn a lot about the materials, about learning, teaching, and about themselves as well. So doing evaluations formally and rigorously can also eventually contribute to the development of an ability to conduct principled informal evaluations quickly and effectively when the occasion demands. So needless to say, remember this, evaluation is demanding but rewarding, because it is rewarding because after you evaluate, it is rewarding because after you evaluate, you would know exactly what to do and what decision you have to make, especially if it's post-use evaluation. Very important. But also, no, not all of us are doing that. Probably very limited teachers or people are doing the post-use evaluation. So thank you very much, class. So I hope you are amazed with that thank you video. And let me stop sharing my PowerPoint presentation. So that's it for Unit 2. And I will be posting one task for Unit 2 on the Google Classroom. And class, please prepare also. We have our midterm exam coming very soon. Our coverage will be Unit 1 and Unit 2. And don't forget, next week, I will be posting the video about the SLA theory of Stephen Krashen. Okay, and we are going to have also our feedbacking, okay, next week. So I will schedule a Google meeting before you will take the exam the week after next. Okay, so thank you very much, class, for your time, and I hope you learned a thing or two. And again, just always be positive. God bless you all and keep safe, everyone. Thank you so much. Bye.